pilots.
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and every once in a while I like to do just a little top 5 list. And today I'm bringing my good friend Eric Breen on the channel. We're going to talk about his 5 favorite female superheroes of all times. And I'm going to tell you this right now: it's a little light on the DC characters. So I'm going to add 3 in at the end, just that are my favorite female superhero characters of all times. Just kind of talk about them. These are the greatest or most powerful, or maybe the most influential female superheroes of all time. These are just Eric and mine's favorites. So obviously here with me to talk about this is the man so cool they call him the Breen, the comic book hoarder himself. Eric Breen, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and you picked a good week to call me that too.
Did you hoard some comics? What happened?
I hoarded with authority last week. Picked up a couple hundred.
Did you find an estate sale or something? What happened?
No, I'm working at my LCS again, and the guy bought literally a truckload of comics, and I'm going through a truckload of comics to decide what we're going to put into a dollar sale and what's not going to be. And part of the agreement is I get to keep stuff for myself, and so I did very well.
Nice. You couldn't stop yourself, could you?
I've come to that conclusion that that's just not going to happen.
After 45 years of reading, you know who you are.
I am at peace with it.
So I thought this would be a fun topic. Just talk about some of your personal favorite female superheroes. Talk about why you like them. Interesting. You have Carol Danvers on the list, and you have Captain Marvel, but you don't have Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel. That should be interesting to get to. All right. I'll let you take it. What's your favorite? What's the first female superhero you want to talk about first?
Well, this is in no particular order, but I guess I'll start with the one DC character. I went with Supergirl. Now, there have been many different versions of her. She was introduced in the late 50s, and the early adventures were very simple but very fun and with a certain kind of charm. I mean, she was set up as in an orphanage that she'd have to sneak out of to go become Supergirl. And at the beginning, she had to keep her identity a secret because Superman didn't want word getting out that there was a Supergirl until she was ready. And so they were very, like I said, fun all ages books. Then later on, when she got her own series, her own feature and adventure comics, they sent her off to Stanhope College, so she became a college student, and Supergirl on the side there. So they had developed the Linda Danvers, persona more, and then as she got her own book for a while, and then a feature in Superman Family, where she actually became an actress on a soap opera of all things, and that led eventually to her own title, where she moved to Chicago and gave her a supporting cast and had adventures there. And this was took her up to about the Crisis, where she made the ultimate sacrifice during the Crisis,
along with Barry Allen, right?
Yes. And so she was gone from the DC universe for a while, but then there was an outcry to get her back in some way, shape, or form. So that's when they developed the Matrix character, where she was basically a protoplasmic identity that took on the identity of Supergirl and became involved with Lex Luthor post-Crisis. And then that character lasted for several years. And that character had interesting moments because she had some of Linda Danvers' memories, but eventually became kind of her own person. And then in the Peter David series, they kind of did a new trick on where it's kind of the Matrix merged with the real Linda Danvers, which was a very interesting idea. And that led to an 80-issue series that I recommend for anybody to read, because it was just a tremendous version of the character. And they tweaked with a lot of the legends. They even had her use the costume that they used in the cartoon, where she had the white T-shirt and the little skirt. And look, from the Superman cartoons of the 90s, but it was a very well done book, and she said, and they've capped it off with bringing back a version of Kara Zor-el from the Silver Age. So it's really neat. That's it. So I'm a huge fan of that character up to about that point. The versions that have come after that, not as much, but I really do like the character overall.
Yeah, it's interesting what they're showing, like her future and in future state. Like she's kind of jealous and she doesn't like Clark and his son John because they stole her thunder, kind of thing. Obviously, we're getting this Tom King Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow series, and I don't think will do much flattering for the character, but we shall see. But you're saying go back to that Peter David run with the character, and that's the creme de la creme of Supergirl.
Absolutely.
All right, so there's Supergirl out the way. Kara Zor-el, one of your 5 favorite female characters. What's the next character you want to talk about?
Sue Storm, the Invisible Girl, eventually the Invisible Woman. When the Fantastic Four started, her power was just that. She could turn invisible, and that was it. And over time,
She couldn't do force fields yet?
no, that was developed over time, and it started simple, where she could do smaller force fields, and then over time she learned how to control them better. She could extend them out further. She could, put people in force field bubbles to save them from explosions. And while her powers were developing, she was developing as a character, becoming more independent and feeling more of a member of the team, while also functioning as the wife of the leader of the team. And their relationship evolved over time to, actually it was always portrayed as equals, but it was, in those days, it was kind of hard to make that believable with someone who could just turn invisible. So the more her powers increased, the more of an asset she became to the team, without losing sight of the fact that she was also a wife and then eventually a mother. And she, and with that came conflicts. At one point, Franklin was manifesting dangerous powers that, if left unchecked, could have literally destroyed the world. And this long before Onslaught. I'm talking about in the early 70s. And Reed tried to shut his powers off and ended up putting him in a coma. And she left him over it. And
That's one of my favorite aspects of the character, because Reed, the character I do like, he has some issues as far as his intellect. He sometimes goes a little too far with his ideas, and I do like that Sue Storm a lot of times will check him right down in the SmackDown hotel where he needs to be, kind of check his ego and be like, "What the hell are you doing?"
Yeah, and they eventually resolved it, and they got back together, and their marriage, it pretty much remained strong from that point. But it was also kind of a turning point to where the FF had always had the one leader, Reed. After that point, you kind of got the feeling that it was more of the Richards family was the leader of the team. Again, that's, there's only 4 of them, but Sue was every bit as capable a leader and strategist eventually as Reed was. And her story arc through the years, her character growth was, very well done. And she became, like I said, she became a dangerous character in her own right, and very well respected throughout the Marvel Universe for her abilities. So yeah, to me, she's kind of like they're the first family of the Marvel Universe, and that's because both of them bring a lot to the table.
Well, it feels like she's almost a cornerstone of the Fantastic Four, because normally when I say Reed Richards has an idea and then Sue Storm opposes it and she lays out why, I'm almost always on Sue Storm's side to be like, yes, let's take the humanitarian approach of this normal human being, because Reed's, you're thinking so far out of the box, it doesn't feel like you're human right now.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like that over the last 20 or so years. The 30 or so that preceded them, Reed was, with putting Franklin in a coma accidentally notwithstanding, his ideas were, less. He didn't need to be put in check as much in the older days as he may, have to be now. But either way, yes, Sue's character growth was one of the strong suits of Marvel writing for decades.
All right, I agree with you. What's your next female character that's in your 5 favorites?
Let's go to the She-Hulk.
Jennifer Walters.
For a character that was basically created to preserve a copyright and to beat DC to the punch. I don't think there were any long range thinking into what they were going to do with the character, because she was basically the a female version of the Hulk that could form more complete sentences. But it was after her initial 25 issue run that they started developing her personality a little less rage and a little more fun and bombastic. And there was a little transition period with an issue of Marvel 2-in-1 where she met the Thing, and that kind of set up what was to come. And then from there, she joined the Avengers. And that's when they, gave her, she went from wearing the tattered loincloth, for lack of a better term, to a very stylish woman in her own right. Her personality continued to develop, and she became this fun, badass chick that, sorry, shouldn't use that in 2021, fun, badass woman that was easily an equal member of the team. And so much so that eventually, after Secret Wars, when Ben decided to stay on the Secret War world, they got the She-Hulk to take his place in the Fantastic Four. So from a character to go from somebody that was basically an afterthought to a member in good standing of the two main super teams at Marvel and deserving her place on both, it kind of told you how much that character had grown. And then, John Byrne went a step further by making her the fourth wall breaking Deadpool years before there was a Deadpool. It is to play up the fun aspect of the character, to show that not only could she be tough, she could also be fun. And there were, a few runs after that, one by Dan Slott that was very good, one by Peter David that was very good. And that character was just a blast for decades. And I said, she earned her place as a top-notch character in the Marvel Universe.
It's what's interesting. You bring up She-Hulk. Obviously, you've already talked about Supergirl, where you're talking about, female counterparts to original male heroes. And a lot of times, if you leave them as carbon copies or too similar, they don't feel special and they don't feel unique. And it's like, why is this character even here? And I think the reason that, She-Hulk is well regarded is because she's eventually is not very much like the Bruce Banner Hulk at all, as far as character motivations and the way that they use their powers and whatnot. Obviously, she's very much in control of herself. A very sexy, proud feminist woman that also uses her intellect, as a lawyer and things like that. So it was smart to diverge the character from the original. I think it's Savage She-Hulk, where she was just a giant, green woman, and ended up working out in the end. But if you don't differentiate the character from the original, they never feel special.
And that's kind of what I see Marvel doing now with the character, is they've regressed her back almost to that 1980 version, where she does just kind of feel like a female Hulk. And
what's the point?
Yeah,
I already have a Hulk.
Yeah, she's another character that she's on my list, but up to a point.
Mm-hmm.
Because unfortunately, I think she's being horribly misused now.
All right, well, let's get to the last two. These are the interesting ones. You have Carol Danvers. You have Captain Marvel on your list, but you do not have Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel. What's the next one you want to talk about?
Ms. Marvel, the Carol Danvers Ms. Marvel. She was the first new character. Now, she'd been around as a military member going back to Marvel Superheroes 13 in the late 60s, but she was brought into the superhero universe in late 1976, and that was the first new character, one of the first new characters that came out when I started collecting. So I was instantly drawn to it. And in the early issues, she didn't even know she was Ms. Marvel. She would black out and become the character. So that led to some conflicts and some interesting character arcs. And her series came and went, and probably what's best remembered for that is it introduced Mystique in, I think, issue 18. But she had an encounter with Rogue while Rogue was still a villain, and Rogue accidentally took her memories and power. And for years, she had to deal with that. And From there, I believe, if I'm getting the timeline right, she ended up becoming binary and was a
Hmm.
member of the Starjammers in the X-Men book. And eventually she did become Ms. Marvel again. But the character had depth and she had problems. She went through her bout with alcoholism. And ironically enough, it was Tony Stark that helped her through it. She had she had helped the Avengers in her early days. She helped the team during the Korvac saga, and then would make subsequent guest appearances, and finally eventually became a member of the Avengers. And as recent as 2005 or 6, when they split up the teams, she was made the leader of the Mighty Avengers. So she was strong, capable, had a complicated history, but she earned her place as a true leader. And I think she was one of the characters that really wasn't broke, so didn't need to be fixed. And now I would say she needs to be fixed again. But her, from 1977 through say 2010, and she did. There was a storyline during Civil War where she became estranged from her best friend, Julia Carpenter, because they found themselves on opposite sides of the conflict, and it wasn't resolved in an issue, and they weren't besties again. I mean, they fought it out, but Carol Danvers as Ms. Marvel was a complex, incredible character that I miss to this day.
It's amazing how much depth they wiped out from the character. Where previously a lot of her struggles and her motivations, she's a kind of a character of two worlds. She was a hero. Obviously she had a fall from grace. She's lost her memory. She's had her power stolen. She had bouts with alcoholism, and now the Carol Danvers that you see today is almost unrecognizable, and it's too bad.
Yeah, that's I said I miss Carol Danvers, and unfortunately I don't think we're ever going to see anything close to that version again.
Well, if we're never going to see that version of Carol Danvers as Ms. Marvel again, we're certainly probably not going to see this version of Captain Marvel again. You went with Monica Rambeau as your fifth favorite comic book female superhero. What is about Monica Rambeau as Captain Marvel?
What I liked about her, she was introduced in the Amazing Spider-Man Annual 16, and from her creation, she found herself with these incredible powers where she could travel at the speed of light. She could, send out like photon energy, and but she wasn't perfect from the get. She was very capable from the beginning, and she soon earned her place on the Avengers. What I liked about her, she had she was an adult, probably. I would say she was probably 30ish when she was introduced, but still relied on her parents for advice and guidance, and they both supported her. Her father, I think, was an ex-fire chief, and so she had a really cool family structure. And because a lot of times I said, the family either doesn't know their child is a superhero or doesn't approve. This was a kind of a different take on that. And she became an Avenger. She took the name Captain Marvel. Well, she took the name Captain Marvel, then became an Avenger with no idea that there had ever been another one. And at the time, Eros, who had been codenamed Star Fox by the Wasp, Thanos' brother, was a member of the team. And he was at first put off by that because he felt it to be disrespectful to, Marvel's legacy. And she confessed to him that she had no idea, offered to change the name. And if I remember correctly, I think they didn't get to resolve that at first because the Avengers business took over. And she proved herself to the point to where Eros went to her and said, keep the name. Marvel would be proud to know that his name is being carried on by someone so worthy. And a couple years down the road, Monica Rambeau became the leader of the Avengers. And it wasn't something that was just handed to her. She proved herself over time as more than a capable leader because she was a sound strategist, empathetic. She was a wonderful character in the Roger Stern Avengers run. Now, I'm not really sure what's happened to her since then. I know she's had a few name changes, and I said I'm not even sure if Marvel's doing anything with her now. But For those first 5 or 6 or 7 years or so of that character, she, like I said, absolutely, you know, that's a character done right.
It's crazy that Marvel felt the need to replace or to place Carol Danvers as the new Captain Marvel. They wanted like a feminist icon character to take up the mantle when you essentially already had one. You fixed a problem that didn't exist, and then you essentially downgraded a character or define that character down as if they weren't worthy of carrying that mantle. But I don't know. I guess traditionally Monica Rambeau as Captain Marvel's greatest enemy wasn't the patriarchy, so they had to put a new character in there.
Well, that's the thing with those when those two characters flourished, and you can say the same about She-Hulk and everybody on this list. It was before identity politics started playing as big a role in comics as they do now, where characters were elevated based on merit, fan interest, and this. You know, any writer will tell you sometimes the story starts to write itself, and the plans you had for a character initially may not be how they end up. These characters all organically ended up where they were as as members in good standing of the Marvel and DC universes, and they got there because they were well done characters, and nothing felt forced about any of them.
Yep. So I have a few that I'm going to add to the list. Obviously, I felt there wasn't enough representation for DC characters, so I got a couple I'm going to throw in there. The first one's going to be Green Lantern Jessica Cruz, a newer character. I'm a big fan of the Green Lantern mythos, Green Lantern Corps. I do think there are too many Human Lanterns. And, there probably needs to be a culling, but they certainly shouldn't be getting rid of Jessica Cruz. There's so much story left to tell with that character. And typically, I think traditionally, if you're going to create a new Green Lantern character, essentially they should come from a background that should essentially exude will, kind of like John Stewart's background, Guy Gardner, Hal Jordan, some of the traditional Green Lanterns we have. Obviously, with the introduction of Kyle Rayner, that changed a bit. I don't think it takes great will to be an artist. So they kind of changed the parameters of what it took to become a Green Lantern. And I think Jessica Cruz overcoming her personal anxiety issues and some of those issues that she has that are personal issues and becoming a great Green Lantern, it may be one of the better Green Lanterns, is a story that I want to see. And I don't think they've told it yet, but I think the framework is all there for a really, really cool character.
I'm also a huge Jessica Cruz fan. Of the modern characters that have been created in the last 10 or 12 years, the dynamic between Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz, I think it's like a buddy cop movie where the two of them just work so well together. And I think the Green Lantern series was the spotlight for that. And I know it wasn't allowed to continue, and that's unfortunate because and she was good in, I think, was it Justice League Odyssey? Was she in?
Yes.
Okay. I liked her in that, but I really liked the two of them together. And if they had been allowed to continue, I was just kind of hoping that nobody would pull a later season moonlighting with them, because those two as friends and not taking it to the next level, I think you could have. There was something special there.
I agree. Hopefully they'll revisit that in the future, but I think Jessica Cruz has the makings of one of the great, more modern new characters. The next one I'm going to go to, I'll stick with DC. I'm shocked that you didn't put this character on the list. I'll go with Barbara Gordon, not as Batgirl, but her time as Oracle. Just thinking about what she overcame, obviously with the assault from Joker that leaves her paralyzed, and you would think, maybe that would fracture her psyche, kill her spirit. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to help people. Look what happened to me. She did not take the woe is me, kind of mentality. She became more determined, and she decided to use her intellect, which was greater than anything else that she had left, and she became the Oracle. And just one of the coolest, most resilient characters in all of comic books. And I'm glad that she's returning as the Oracle, but there was an enormous vacuum just missing with that character, especially in the Bat Family books.
The only reason why Oracle wasn't on my list was because I put her in like a separate category, because I never thought of her as a superhero. She was more of like the glue that held the DC universe together. So I had like a special category for her. because I agree. As Batgirl, she was a good character. As Oracle, she was a great character. And for those years in the 90s, she was the, like I said, the glue that kept the DC universe together. Everybody pretty much ran through her for information that was vitally important for what they were doing. And I really miss that version of Oracle.
And I'm glad that she's come back. Hopefully, we'll get some new good Oracle stories moving forward. We shall see. We know all the Batman books are kind of heading towards the Magistrate, so who knows? But I'm glad it's back with Barbara Gordon as Oracle. Is amazing. The last character, I think it's hard to list off your favorite female characters without getting X-Men in there. There's so many wonderful female X-Men characters as far as the history, and I'm just going to go with one of the original. Well, not the originals, obviously, but the original Uncanny X-Men on Second Genesis. I'm going with Storm. I really like Aurora Monroe. I think it's a really interesting character. I think the power to control the weather is awesome. She also has the power of flight. But, with the character's history where she was essentially, abandoned and became a thief, and then she was worshipped as a goddess, she's got to come from some interesting places. But the fact that she's always, I think, feels like to me, what she's written correctly, she's like grounded in hope and optimism about humanity, no matter what they do to her. I really like that about the character.
Storm probably should have been on my list as well. And one of the things about her is that she defeated Scott Summers for the right to lead the team while she didn't have her powers. And her development from the time she was introduced in Giant Size X-Men 1 through the Claremont run, second to none. And I know I get accused of fighting the culture war in all these videos, but this has to be said. For everybody that thinks that comics weren't, progressive until recently, if you were reading Marvel in the mid to late 80s, the two main superhero teams, the X-Men and Avengers, were both led by Black women. Enough said.
Absolutely. So I love Storm as a character. I love the X-Men just as a franchise, and I think she's the greatest female character. But there's so many in there. You got Jean Grey, Kitty Pryde, and the list goes on and on. But I would go with Storm. Hey, she's one of my favorite characters. That'll basically do our list here, Eric. Is there anything else you wanted to say about your favorite female superheroes? Is there one that needed honorable mention before we wrap this up?
Well, I said, Oracle, and as you said, Storm. This list could have been a top 10 easily.
It's hard to limit these down, but then that would be a 45-minute video.
Yeah, yes, it would.
All right, later, buddy.
All right, take care.